Do you know what I like to do when I come home from happy hour? I like to look at some baseball cards. So I'm up in my room looking at some baseball cards, but I watched the video interview with Splendid Sports Cards and Double D. And man, it's a fantastic show. I'm gonna put the link in here. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. But they, Splendid Sports Cards was talking about the live that I did with James. And he brought up that I said that I think vintage cards are peaking. And I just wanted to further that discussion. That's all. So I do believe that vintage cards are peaking. And I will lay out my reasoning. And doesn't mean that they're going away. Doesn't mean they're never going to be worth anything. I don't mean that. I just mean I think that vintage cards are peaking. And the reason that I think that is that times are changing. I mean, we have terms like for athletes like toxic masculinity. I was watching the Induction Hall of Fame, and Minnie Minoso's son was sitting there with his husband. He doesn't play baseball. There are the younger generation I was just with my bartender tonight, and he collects Pokemon and Magic the Gathering with his son. That is what younger people do. So when you combine the fact that society is changing away from masculinity, from sports, and you have our age group here, right? My age group. All these cards we used to want as a kid, now we can afford them. Well, what happens, as we get older, maybe sell our cards for retirement or die off? What about the younger generation? Are they going to come in here and be paying these REA prices for vintage cards when they grew up on either shiny cards, and a lot of them look at the vintage cards as old and dingy and they're not going to find 10s, right? Like, is that going to sustain when they're more into gaming and those types of things? Sure, there are young collectors into vintage, but they're few and far between compared to us. Now, these guys that are buying up Mickey Mantle cards, they're not buying Mickey Mantle because they're a fan of Mickey Mantle. I'll bet you they don't even know that he won a Triple Crown in 1956. I'll bet you they can't tell you who he replaced in center field. What they can tell you is that his cards always go up, that you can make a lot of money on Mickey Mantle cards. And that's not going to sustain things. Because if they come back, if prices pull back, guess what? There's no nostalgia there to keep you. See, you and I, us collectors, we will collect this stuff whether it's $1 or $100,000. I want this rare Cuban Tris speaker, whatever price, right? If I can afford it, whatever price. If I could get that for $1, man, I'm happier to get it for $1. I'll buy it all day long. And so that's why I think vintage cards are peaking. Younger collectors are more about the price point, what they could sell it for, what they can invest in it for. I've said it before, like my daughter had a boyfriend and he didn't know who Mickey Mantle was. His father never taught him about that. And he told me he was a huge hockey fan. And God love him, he is. But he didn't know the old players. He didn't know the old players. He never heard of Ken Dryden. He never heard of most of the old players, right? He never heard of Mike Bossy. And this isn't a knock. It's just that modern collectors aren't into the history. And when you look at football, and I say it all the time, with the rule changes, if you just go by statistics, which a lot of sports fans do, there will never be an old wide receiver or quarterback that can hold up to these modern guys. The game has changed dramatically. You have the Mel Blount rule. You've added games. You have you're not allowed to touch the quarterback anymore. Intentional grounding used to be a serious penalty. Now it's nothing. Like, you can just throw the ball down on the ground. That didn't exist before. So who are your top quarterbacks of all time, yardage wise? They're all modern. Who are your top receivers? They're all modern. And who are your top running backs and kick returners? They're all old because the game has totally changed. So I do believe that we are hitting a peak. And I don't mean like it happened yesterday or it happened today. I mean, we're hitting a peak, right? That doesn't mean it can't go up further. I just believe that we are hitting a peak because it's our age group. All the comments I get are about nostalgia. You know, I talk about walking all over the place and walking miles to get mini helmets. Well, who else wants to own this but me? Because I have nostalgia to it. Young kids don't have nostalgia to it. And, you know, like I said, if you're into the shiny new cards, the old cards can look bad. You know, not everybody's into antiques. When I was young, I was into the history of the game. The older the card, the better. I didn't care about condition. If you want to collect PSA 10s, you simply cannot collect the cards that I collect because they don't exist in 10s. They don't. And it's our age group that appreciates this. Now, I see some young people coming in, slaving. And Junior Baseball Fanatic 12, like, I just want to embrace them and promote them because I think they're a rarity. But I look at, like, my nephew. All he does is game all day. He doesn't know ball players. You know, you have guys becoming women now, and it's not even popular to be masculine anymore. Like, this is society is changing in a big way. And so who's going to be left to collect? How many of these young guys, you know, they know they'll buy up the expensive Mickey Mantles because they know they're worth money. They'll buy up the Willie Mays. How many of them know Rube Marquard? How many of them know many of these other secondary players who were fantastic? I'll bet they don't know Big Ed Walsh. I'll bet they don't know he was the last 40-game winner. Bet they never heard of Johnny Vandermeer, Ted Kluszewski, Rube Waddell, one of the greatest pitchers in history. You think they heard of these guys? You think they heard of Addie Joss? I bet they even heard of Cap Anson and Big Ed Delahanty. So what they're collecting is going to be what's worth money. And let me tell you something. Like I said, like the guys that are loving Mickey Mantle are shrinking. The guys that remember Mickey Mantle are way shrinking. And most Mickey Mantle players, collectors, you either heard about it from your father or you know his 52 Topps cards worth a fortune, so you want the rest of his cards. Right? You just don't see people going, look at Hank Aaron's rookie card compared to Mickey Mantle's second year card. Look at Willie Mays 52 versus Mickey Mantle 52. It's just, these cards could maintain their value, these top handful of cards, the T206 Honus Wagner, the 52 Mickey Mantle, because they are almost like art. They're like Americana art, right? But who's going to buy the Archie Vaughns, the Paul Wainers? Who's going to buy those guys? Mickey Cochran. Tell me, am I off base? I just wanted to kind of do a reaction video to clear up my thoughts on the matter. And if you haven't watched Splendid Sports Cards, you need to check him out. He does a great interview. And my man Double D, you killed it. Thanks for watching.